I walked away after seeing my wife with another man. Then I uncovered the full truth. I always believed that trust was the foundation of a strong marriage. 6 years together, and while we had our ups and downs, I never questioned her loyalty. Until that night. She had been insistent about going to the party, saying it was just a casual gathering with work friends. I wasn't in the mood, but she kept pushing. "Come on, it'll be fun," she said with a bright smile. The kind that used to make me feel like the luckiest man alive. But lately, something had been off. She had been glued to her phone more than usual, laughing at messages she never shared, always brushing off my questions with vague answers. The party was loud, packed with people I barely knew. She disappeared into the crowd almost immediately, her laughter ringing out above the music. I stayed in the kitchen, nursing a drink, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Then I saw it. She had slipped outside, and curiosity, or maybe instinct, drove me to follow. Stepping into the cool night air, I scanned the backyard, my pulse quickening. And there she was, with him. They stood too close, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that made my stomach tighten. Her hand rested on his chest, his fingers brushed along her waist. Then, as if the world hadn't just shattered around me, they kissed. I felt frozen, like my body refused to move. The sight of it, of her, my wife, giving herself to someone else was like a blow I hadn't seen coming. The bottle in my hand slipped, hitting the ground with a dull thud. She jerked away instantly, her eyes wide as they locked onto mine. For a moment, everything was silent. Even over the music and the distant chatter, the world had narrowed down to just the three of us. She looked horrified, like a child caught in a lie. He turned, confused, until he saw my face. I didn't wait for an explanation. I didn't need one. Turning on my heel, I walked away, each step heavier than the last. Inside the house, the music thumped against my skull, but I barely heard it. I moved through the crowd, past the smiling faces, past the people oblivious to the fact that my life had just been ripped apart. I got into my car and drove, the silence suffocating. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, my mind racing with every possible question. Had it been going on for weeks? Months? Longer? She didn't come home that night. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just sat in the darkness of our living room, staring at nothing, replaying the moment over and over again. When the sun rose, I still hadn't slept. And then, at 9 a.m., the front door creaked open. She stood there, looking like hell, makeup smeared, eyes swollen and red. She clutched her phone in her trembling hands like it was a lifeline. "Please," she whispered. "Let me explain." I said nothing, just stepped aside. If she wanted to talk, she would. But she wouldn't like what I had to say. I closed the door behind her, the sound heavier than it should have been, like a final seal on whatever was about to happen next. She stood in the middle of the living room, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, hands trembling as she clutched her phone like it held the answers to all of this. I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to make this easier for her. If she wanted to explain, she'd have to do it on her own. She swallowed hard, eyes flicking toward the half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table, the untouched glass beside it, the mess I hadn't bothered to clean up from the night before. Finally, she took a breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't what it looked like." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "Not what it looked like?" I repeated, shaking my head. "I saw you. I saw everything." My voice was calmer than I felt, a cold edge to it that even surprised me. "So go ahead. Tell me what I didn't see." Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't in the mood for a performance. She wiped them away quickly, as if realizing that they wouldn't help her now. "It was a mistake," she said, voice cracking. "I wasn't thinking. I had too much to drink. I got caught up in the moment. It didn't mean anything." I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. "A mistake," I echoed. "A mistake is forgetting to lock the door at night. A mistake is leaving your keys in the car. This," I gestured toward her, toward the memory still burned into my mind. "This was a choice you made. repeatedly, from the looks of it. My voice dropped lower, more dangerous. So tell me, how long has this been going on? She hesitated, and that was enough of an answer. If it had been just a one-time thing, she would have said it immediately. The silence stretched between us, suffocating. 2 months, she finally whispered. Her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. I nodded slowly, letting the weight of those words sink in. 2 months, 8 weeks of lies, 60 days of sneaking around while I was here, in this house, trusting her. Working late, tired, thinking everything was fine while she was out there with him. You knew what you were doing, I said, my voice even. Every time you looked me in the eyes and told me you loved me. Every time you came home and acted like nothing was wrong. You knew. She shook her head violently, stepping toward me, but I didn't move. No, I didn't, she started, but I cut her off with a sharp laugh. You didn't, I repeated. You didn't know that sneaking around behind my back was wrong? That lying to my face was a betrayal? I took a step forward now, watching as she shrank back. Tell me something. Where did you do it? Hotels? His place? Your car? The words burned as I said them, but I needed to know. She flinched, guilt written all over her face. She didn't answer, and she didn't have to. I already knew. I turned away, running a hand down my face, exhaling slowly as I tried to control the storm brewing inside me. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I turned back to her, my expression unreadable. But you did, I said simply. You didn't care about hurting me while you were sneaking around. You didn't care when you kissed him last night. You didn't care until you got caught. Tears streamed down her face now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, just an empty, gaping hole where trust used to be. What happens now? She asked finally, voice trembling. I stared at her. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, and realized that I didn't even recognize her anymore. The version of her I had loved no longer existed. Maybe she never had. You're going to pack a bag, I said after a long silence. And you're going to leave. Her eyes widened in panic. Jake, please. I held up a hand, cutting her off. I need time. I need space. And right now, I can't even look at you. She opened her mouth to argue, but one look at my face silenced her. She turned slowly and walked toward the bedroom. I didn't follow. Couldn't. The sound of her packing filled the apartment, drawers opening and closing, the muffled rustling of fabric. I stared at the wall, my mind blank, my body numb. When she finally emerged with her bag slung over her shoulder, she hesitated in the doorway. I never wanted this, she whispered. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at her. The door closed behind her with a soft click. And for the first time in years, I was truly alone. The silence in the house was unbearable. It wasn't the peaceful kind, the kind you crave after a long, exhausting day. No, this was the kind of silence that pressed down on my chest, suffocating, heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank television screen, my mind playing the same scene over and over again. Her in the backyard, her lips on his, the look of shock on her face when she saw me. I had thrown her out. That much was clear. But now that she was gone, the real questions started creeping in. What now? Did I call a lawyer? Did I tell people? Or did I just let this sit for a while, hoping the pain would dull on its own? I didn't know. All I knew was that nothing about this felt real. Hours passed in a haze. I must have fallen asleep at some point because when I opened my eyes, the living room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the fog in my head. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. Even though she had only been gone for a few hours, her absence was like a gaping wound, a reminder that everything I thought I had was now broken beyond repair. I reached for my phone out of habit, my fingers hovering over her name in my contacts before I clenched my fist and set it down. I wasn't going to call her. Not now. Maybe not ever. But that didn't stop my mind from wandering if she was with him right now, if she had run straight into his arms after walking out of here. The thought made my blood boil, but I forced myself to push it aside. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts until I landed on the one person I knew I could count on. Ryan. He picked up after 2 rings. "Hey man," he said, his voice casual like it was just another Saturday. "She's gone," I said flatly. There was a pause. Then, "Wait, what? Gone how? What happened?" I took a deep breath, rubbing the back of my neck. "She cheated," I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "with some guy from her office. I caught them last night at a party. I kicked her out this morning." Ryan swore under his breath. "Jesus, I'm so sorry, man. Do you want me to come over?" I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk about it, to put everything into words. But the thought of sitting here alone for another night made my chest tighten. "Yeah," I said finally. "Bring." He showed up half an hour later, 6-pack in hand. He didn't say anything when he walked in, just gave me a nod and dropped onto the couch beside me. We cracked open the beers, and for a while we just sat there in silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, the kind that came from years of friendship. Eventually, Ryan spoke. "So, tell me what happened." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I caught her last night at the party. She was outside with some guy, and I saw them kiss." Ryan let out a low whistle. "Damn, did she try to deny it?" "She didn't have the chance," I said bitterly. "I left before she could. She came home this morning, crying, begging me to let her explain. But what was there to explain? She admitted it. 2 months, Ryan. 2 months of lying to my face." He shook his head, taking a long sip of his beer. "That's messed up, man. I don't even know what to say." "Yeah, me neither." We sat in silence for a while, the television droning on in the background. I could feel Ryan watching me out of the corner of his eye, waiting for me to say something, to break down maybe. But I couldn't. "What are you going to do?" he asked eventually. "I don't know," I admitted. "I told her to leave, but everything feels like it's up in the air now. 6 years together, and this is how it ends." "It doesn't have to be the end," he said carefully. "I mean, I'm not saying you should forgive her, but people make mistakes, man. Maybe there's something worth salvaging." I shook my head, the anger bubbling up again. "A mistake is forgetting my birthday or burning dinner. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. Over and over again." Ryan didn't argue. He just nodded and took another sip of his beer. That night, after he left, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. Her smile was so genuine, her eyes full of love and promise. It felt like a cruel joke now, a snapshot of something that no longer existed. I grabbed the frame and turned it face down. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll start figuring out what to do. Tonight, I just needed to survive. But when morning came, the anger inside me had settled into something colder, something more focused. I wasn't just going to sit here and let her walk away without consequences. I needed answers, real ones, and I knew exactly where to start. By the time morning rolled around, I still hadn't slept. My body felt heavy, my mind stuck in an endless loop of everything I had seen, everything she had said, and all the things she refused to admit. I couldn't just sit there anymore, drowning in unanswered questions. I needed to know the full truth, not just her tear-soaked apologies or the half-truths she had fed me. I needed proof. I needed to see exactly how deep the betrayal went. Her laptop sat on the desk in our shared office, untouched since she left. It had always been our laptop, but she used it more than I did, especially for work. I told myself I wasn't crossing a line by opening it. She had already shattered every boundary we had, every unspoken rule of trust that a marriage was supposed to be built on. She had no right to privacy after what she had done. The screen lit up as I entered the familiar password, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for a brief moment. What was I even looking for? Proof? Confirmation of something I already knew? Or was I hoping to find nothing? To see that maybe this wasn't as bad as I imagined? But that hope was gone the second I opened her email. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Work emails, promotions, the usual clutter. But then I saw the folder, Work Projects, buried under a pile of unread messages. My gut twisted as I clicked on it. And there it was. Emails neatly tucked away, like she thought I would never find them. Some of them were short, just a few lines. Others were longer, more detailed. But they all had one thing in common. Him. I opened the most recent one. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I'll find a way to see you again soon. Promise. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt, but I forced myself to keep going. More messages, stretching back for weeks. Every excuse she had given me, every late night at work, every moment she had smiled in my face while planning to be with him. It was all there in black and white. I told him I had a meeting. He doesn't suspect a thing. I wish we had more time. One day, maybe. I feel alive when I'm with you. That last line made something inside me snap. I pushed back from the desk, my hands gripping the edge so tightly my knuckles turned white. Alive. That was the second time I had seen that word. The first had been in her journal. Like a man possessed, I moved to her nightstand and pulled open the drawer. Her journal was right where she always kept it, the leather-bound cover smooth and untouched. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning over her careful handwriting until I found what I was looking for. I saw him again today. I feel alive when I'm with him. But the guilt is unbearable. He doesn't deserve this. I don't know what's wrong with me. Why can't I stop? I let out a slow breath, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. She had written those words in private, where she thought I'd never see them. She knew it was wrong. She knew I didn't deserve it. But she did it anyway, over and over again. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface flared white-hot. But underneath it was something colder, sharper. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was clarity. I wasn't going to sit here and wallow in betrayal while she got to cry and pretend she was the victim. She had made her choices, and now she was going to face the consequences. My phone buzzed on the table. I grabbed it without thinking, my jaw clenching when I saw the name on the screen. Jake, please. Can we talk? I can't stand this silence. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. She wanted to talk now? After all of this? She wanted to explain? What was left to explain? After a long moment, I typed back two simple words. Not yet. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house, my mind running through everything I had found. The emails, the messages, the journal entries. It wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern, a deliberate, calculated series of choices. She had lied, manipulated, and planned every step of it. And she thought she could just come back, cry a little, and make it all go away? No. By the time night fell, my decision was made. I wasn't going to let her dictate how this ended. I wasn't going to give her control over the narrative. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Another message from her. Please, Jake, I just need to talk to you. Can we meet? I could have ignored it. Let her stew in the silence she was so desperate to escape. But I wasn't done yet. Fine. I typed back. Meet me at the house at 6. Don't be late. The hours dragged as I prepared. I went over everything. The emails, the texts, the lies spelled out in her own handwriting. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, I was ready. When she walked through the door, she looked different. Pale. Exhausted. Like she hadn't slept in days. Good. She tried to smile, but it fell flat under my glare. Jake, she started, her voice trembling. Thank you for letting me come back. Sit down. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself onto the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. I didn't sit. I stood over her, the weight of everything I had uncovered sitting heavy between us. I placed the laptop and her journal on the coffee table in front of her. Her eyes flicked between them, confusion and dread creeping onto her face. What is this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This, I said, opening the laptop, is everything you thought you could hide from me. Your emails, your messages, every lie you told, spelled out in your own words. Her face went white. Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. And this, I continued, picking up the journal, is your confession. I feel alive with him. That's what you wrote, isn't it? Tears welled up in her eyes. She reached for the journal, but I pulled it away. No, I said coldly. You don't get to run from this. You're going to sit here and listen, because you owe me that much. And for the next 20 minutes I laid it all out. Every message, every plan, every betrayal. By the time I was done, she was sobbing into her hands, her shoulders shaking with each ragged breath. Why? I demanded, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to stay calm. Why wasn't I enough? It wasn't about you, she choked out, her voice muffled by her hands. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it's the truth. I don't know, Jake. Lost. Stupid. I made a mistake. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. A mistake? You keep calling it that like it was some accident. Like you didn't choose this. Every single time. She sobbed harder, but I felt nothing. No pity. No sympathy. Just a cold, detached certainty about what had to happen next. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her for a long moment, the woman I once loved, and gave her the only answer that mattered. We're done. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload.